Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Okay, so we could be looking at the end of the summer, a election being called. Jagmeet Singh is saying that that election isn't necessary, that they can still go forward with government until the mandated election time without causing an early election. That we can continue forth, reopen Parliament in the fall as scheduled, and move forward. He has been quoted saying that that having an early election could be a power grab by the Liberal government to eliminate the minority government that would get the NDP opinion lifted out of government, and so they would have absolute power without any checks or balances. That may not necessarily be a good thing, especially when we consider how the NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has advocated for things like paid sick pay, has advocated for the continuation of of COVID supports to help people live in an adequate manner, even in lieu of the fact that they don't have a job. In some of these supports are actually the balance between people being able to keep their homes, pay rent, put food on the table, and be secure. So, is Jagmeet Singh right? Can the government continue without an election? Is Justin Trudeau truly going to call an early election when fall comes, rather than going back to Parliament? We'll actually have to see. But let's listen to more of what Jagmeet Singh actually had to say from in Burnaby, BC, about the CRB and advocating that the Liberal government keep supports going in order until a full economic recovery has been made and many more people are put back to work.
Meet, c'est à toi.
Thanks so much. Today I want to talk about two issues. First off, here in BC, there have been intense heat waves that have meant that people have lost their life as a result. Over 700 people have lost their life in the Lower Mainland. That number might increase. It's been devastating, and it really highlights how the climate crisis isn't a distant worry. It's a crisis that impacts us right now. With intense heat here in BC, we've seen more climate fires. We've also seen increased flooding in other parts of the country and heat waves in other parts of the country. The climate crisis is upon us, and we need to act with urgency. And while we've been calling for real action at the federal level, Justin Trudeau continues to subsidize the fossil fuel sector, continues to exempt the biggest polluters, and we are going to continue to fight to demand real action, concrete steps to tackle the climate crisis. My heart is also broken for the people of Lytton who've seen their entire community devastated, and 2 people have lost their lives. Again, that number might increase. So we are painfully aware of the pain and immediate threat of the climate crisis. And climate fires are just one example of this immediate and urgent threat. And we need immediate action to respond to this crisis. So we'll continue to ramp up the pressure at the federal level to demand action to fight the climate crisis. In the recovery, there's an opportunity for us to create good jobs, to reduce emissions and fight the climate crisis. And we'll continue to raise our voice to push for those concrete steps. Second thing I want to talk about today is that we are still dealing with this pandemic. and there are a lot of sectors that are still deeply impacted. I was able to visit and speak with folks that work in the tourism sector, and they tell me that the numbers are simply not there. They do not have, that sector has not returned back to the state it used to be. And they are still struggling. Jobs are still not available for a lot of people that work in tourism or in the arts or in festivals. And so while people are still struggling, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are cutting the help to people who desperately need that help by $800 a month, starting in just about a week. So we are again saying that that is a wrong thing to do. The Liberal government should not be cutting help to people, particularly when people have no other choice. They can't go back to work. Their sectors are still shut down. Service sectors are still not open to the full extent. So jobs are still not available for a lot of people. And the contrast is we look at the Liberals and they have allowed wealthy, large corporations to take public money and to lay off workers, to take public money and pay out their shareholders. So while large corporations have taken public money and have misused it, the Liberals do nothing. But for workers, for people that can't go back to work, he's cutting their help by $800 a month. And that's wrong. Those are 2 points I wanted to raise today before I open up to questions. Donc, des enjeux aujourd'hui, je veux souligner. Premièrement, c'est la crise climatique et comment la crise climatique frappe fort à travers le pays, mais en particulier ici en Colombie-Britannique. Récemment, on a des canicules où plus de 700 personnes sont mortes à cause de la canicule. Et c'est vraiment une urgence, une crise, et on doit prendre des mesures immédiates pour faire face à la crise climatique. Justin Trudeau continue d'exempter les grands pollueurs, et c'est inacceptable quand on a vu que la crise climatique, c'est une crise de maintenant. Aussi, mon cœur brise pour la communauté de Lytton, où toute la communauté était détruite par une feu causé par la crise climatique. Donc, on doit agir, on doit aider les communautés et on doit faire face à la crise climatique immédiatement. Deuxièmement, je veux parler de le fait que le gouvernement libéral et Justin Trudeau vont couper l'aide aux gens qui en ont besoin de $800 par mois dans une semaine. Et c'est inacceptable de faire ça parce qu'on est toujours dans une pandémie et on sait qu'il y a plusieurs secteurs comme le secteur touristique, comme le secteur de services où on n'est pas toujours ouvrir, il y a toujours des problèmes et il y a toujours un manque des emplois dans ce secteur. Pour les artistes, pour les gens qui travaillent avec les festivals, c'est toujours un grand problème. Donc, on exige le gouvernement de ne pas couper l'aide aux gens qui en ont besoin. Et aussi, on veut montrer le contraste que le gouvernement libéral, au lieu de couper l'aide aux gens, doit s'assurer que les grandes compagnies qui ont reçu l'argent public, qui ont remboursé leurs actionnaires, c'est eux, ces compagnies qui doivent payer le juste part. C'est ces compagnies qui doivent repayer l'argent public. Donc, le gouvernement libéral laisse faire les grandes compagnies qui ont reçu l'argent public, qui continuent de donner l'argent aux actionnaires et il coupe l'aide aux gens qui en ont besoin. Donc, ça, c'est un grand problème. Et encore, on exige du gouvernement libéral de ne pas couper l'aide aux gens qui en ont besoin. Merci, thank you. And with that, I'm ready for your questions. Je suis prêt pour vos questions. Thank you.
Merci, thank you very much. So I would like to invite members of the media to please use the raise hand function at the bottom of the page to ask a question and follow up. J'aimerais ça inviter les membres des médias. Veuillez s'il vous plaît utiliser la fonction lever la main au bas de la page pour poser votre question et question de suivi. We will go ahead and start with David Aiken with Global News. Please go ahead.
Hey, Jagmeet. Good afternoon from Ottawa. Good morning from Ottawa, wherever you may be.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm in Burnaby.
Beautiful today. Burnaby. Yes, beautiful Burnaby. I've got a question. Should we have an election towards the end of the summer? And I want to ask you something we asked the PM last week, which is if you have to make a case to voters, can you describe the ballot issue, the ballot question that you'd like voters, and I'm thinking particularly voters in some Surrey ridings, some Coquitlam ridings where it's a Liberal NDP battle, downtown Toronto, Davenport, Toronto, Danforth, the ridings where you could really take some seats from some Liberals. What's the ballot question for English voters, and is there one that might be a little different for voters in Quebec?
Certainly, I really appreciate the question. I want to say, first off, Joe, just a bit of context. I don't believe that an election is a foregone conclusion. I think it would be unnecessary and still irresponsible to do, given we are still dealing with the pandemic, given that we are not past it yet. And not only do we need to make sure that everyone's vaccinated, but we need to give it some time to make sure that once everyone's vaccinated, the numbers are down and stay down. So I don't believe that it's the right thing to do. But to your point, I think the question is going to come down to who's in it for me, who's going to fight for me, who has fought for me, and who has delivered the help that I need. When I look at the pandemic, New Democrats have shown time and time again, when people were down and out, when they needed help, we were there for them. And so the question that people should ask, and I think are asking, who's going to fight for me? When times are tough, when we need help, who's going to fight for me? We were able to increase the wage subsidy. We knew that 10%, as the Liberals introduced it, that wasn't good enough. So we fought to increase it to 75%. We doubled the CRB to make sure people had enough money to put food on the table to pay their rent. We fought to make sure students got direct financial support. And we fought to bring in paid sick leave at the federal level, albeit the Liberals didn't manage that as well as it could have been. But we still were able to help millions of Canadians. And so that's going to be the question. Who's going to fight for you? And who's on your side? We've seen the Liberals vote against pharmacare. The Conservatives joined them. They voted against taxing the ultra-rich, and they voted against getting profit out of long-term care. In all these incidents, the Liberals and the Conservatives chose to side with the ultra-rich and the powerful against people, hurting people. And that's the question. Who's in it for you? Who's on your side? You Democrats have shown we have fought for you, and we will continue to do so.
David, do you have a follow-up?
Just had to hit my unmute again. Yeah, I guess it's the follow-up, I guess, and thank you for that. That's very interesting to hear. Not surprising, I might add, watching you in Parliament for the last while. But then there's some ridings, and particularly your neck of the woods, I'm thinking of Vancouver Island. When Rachel Blaney goes to the voters, or Alistair McGregor, Gord Johns, the alternative there tends to be conservative. That's the blue-orange switch you're sort of riding. So when they campaign and they have to confront a voter which is thinking, well, maybe I vote for Aaron O'Toole instead of for Jagmeet Singh, what does a New Democrat say to that kind of voter where the choice is more blue-orange?
Right. I would say something somewhat similar, but a bit nuanced, in that in this pandemic, we are the only party in opposition who has fought for and secured victories for people. The Conservatives can't point to a single victory, despite being Canada's official opposition. They literally cannot point to a single victory that made people's lives better. They did not fight to help people when they were down and out. They did not fight to increase the supports that people need. And we showed Canadians that when they were down and out, when they needed help, we were there for them. Conservatives weren't. And a couple of the points that I would highlight, the Liberals and Conservatives teamed up together to vote against pharmacare, to vote against taxing the ultra-rich. These are things that Canadians broadly and widely support. They want medication to be included in our healthcare system, and they want the ultra-rich to pay their fair share. They think it's unfair. And the fact that the Liberals and the Conservatives voted against it really presents an argument to Canadians. If you want someone who is going to be solely focused on your well-being, on your family, making sure you've got the help you need to be able to build a good life. New Democrats have shown it. We've got evidence. The Conservatives simply haven't been there, and the Liberals would not have done it but for the fact we were there to fight for it.
Next question, Cormac McSweeney with City News. Please go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Singh. Just wondering, there's a lot of talk on the border right now. The quarantine measures for travelers, both Canadian and select foreign nationals who are coming here for essential purposes, will no longer have to quarantine. The Prime Minister asked moments ago about what the next steps will be, when we can see restrictions lifted with the U.S. border or all international ports of entry. Not really giving any more insight than he had in the past as to what we can expect, given the fact that, the tourism sector employs tens of thousands of people across the country. They're being hit hard right now. Do you think it's time that the federal government introduce some sort of clearer plan for reopening so that both industry and Canadians who are looking at their summer vacation plans can appropriately plan around it?
Quick answer, yes, absolutely. I think one of the biggest problems we've seen in this pandemic with the Liberal government is they've not been very clear with what the next steps are going to be. They were very unclear with the quarantining process, and it was a pretty horrible failure. And I don't take any pleasure in pointing out these failures because I want us to succeed. I want Canada to do well. But it's very clear that the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau have been very ineffective in laying out a clear plan, and they've been very poor at managing the borders. They've were slow to act, and they were not able to put in place an effective quarantine mechanism. Now, with a lot of folks worried about what the next steps are, and a lot of sectors that are hard impacted, particularly as you mentioned, the tourism sector, they need to have some clarity. What can they expect? When will things open up? When can they plan to restaff and to rehire? When can they actually start seeing an opening so that they can get things moving? And Canadians want to know when we can start traveling again. So we need more clarity. We need to know what are the metrics that we need to hit. What level of vaccination do we need to hit before we can consider opening up? Just a clearer plan is absolutely something that Canadians need. Not just people in the business sector, but Canadians living their lives want to know what the plan is. And so again, I will continue to put pressure on Justin Trudeau and the Liberals to lay out that plan and give some clarity and transparency to Canadians.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, excellent. So the government has, there has been the suggestion that we need to get to 75% of Canadians fully vaccinated before we start to see any major lifting of restrictions. Is that good enough for you, or do you think that number is still, given what we're seeing overseas in places like the UK and Israel, where they have had very high full vaccination rates, and yet we're still seeing the Delta variant or potentially other variants, who knows what might happen in the future, causing problems like outbreaks in those countries. So is 75% enough for you, or would you like to see more restrictions last longer after that point? What's your take on that?
Certainly. Well, I'm guided by a couple of things on this. One, of course, is always the public health expertise. We need to follow that expertise and also learn from what's happening around the world. With the recent examples that you pointed out, it should give us some pause in terms of what an opening should look like. It also should give the Liberal government some pause when it comes to discussions around an election, given that even with some vaccination, we should, again, be careful. So I think that we need to see more clarity. That's really what Canadians want to know. What is the plan? What level of vaccination and what metrics we need to follow? What case counts we need to see before we can see more openings? What Canadians are lacking, what they've lacked throughout this, is really a clear vision of what needs to happen before things open up, when will things open up more, and laying out that plan is something the Liberals have been really poor at doing, and Canadians want to know and deserve to know what the plan is with more details. Again, always following public health guidelines and the expert advice, but Canadians need to have more detailed plans put forward to lay out what will be the next steps.
Prochaine question, Boris Proulx avec Le Devoir, c'est à vous.
Bonjour, M. Singh.
Bonjour.
Sénat, le leader du gouvernement au Sénat a demandé aux sénateurs de peut-être se réunir de nouveau en fin juillet pour adopter le projet de loi C6 sur les thérapies de conversion. J'aimerais savoir si vous, quelle est votre perspective là-dessus et quel serait votre message pour les sénateurs?
Ma message clair, c'est le Sénat ne doit pas arrêter les projets de loi qui étaient adoptés par le Parlement. En particulier, les projets de loi qui étaient adoptés avec une grande majorité des députés. Donc, avec la thérapie conversion, c'est clair que c'est une thérapie qui est inacceptable, qui blesse les gens et doit être interdit. Et ce projet de loi doit passer. Donc, le Sénat ne doit pas créer une entache, une barrière pour les projets de loi qui étaient adoptés par le Parlement, par la Chambre des communs. Et comme vous savez, c'est exactement pourquoi je m'oppose au Sénat, parce que c'est une institution qui blesse la démocratie et crée des problèmes pour des projets de loi qui étaient adoptés par le Parlement, qui sont importants et que le Sénat empêche.
Merci. Et toujours sur le même sujet, il semble que pour C10, sur la radiodiffusion, il soit déjà trop tard ou trop compliqué pour le Sénat de revenir. Est-ce que selon vous, ce sont d'autres preuves que le Sénat doit être aboli?
Bien sûr, un autre exemple clair, on a déjà montré à plusieurs reprises, comment le Sénat ne fonctionne pas. Et on a des exemples comme la déclaration des Nations Unies sur les droits des peuples autochtones, qui était adoptée par le Parlement avec une grande majorité des gens dans le passé, et puis le Sénat effectivement a bloqué le passage. C'est maintenant des bonnes nouvelles que maintenant le projet de loi est passé, mais ce n'était pas nécessaire d'avoir trop de temps, comme on a vu, parce que le Sénat a créé des barrières. Avec C10, c'est important de noter que le gouvernement libéral a mal géré ce dossier. Depuis le début de ce dossier, le gouvernement libéral a mal géré ce dossier avec des mauvaises communications. C'est clair que les entreprises internationales doivent payer le juste prix. Et Netflix, Google, Facebook et les autres radiodiffuseurs dans une façon, les médias sociaux, ne payent pas le juste part. Et c'est inacceptable. Et c'était une façon de régler ça, mais le gouvernement libéral a mal géré ce dossier. Et à cause de ça, on est dans cette situation maintenant.
Merci, thank you very much. Alors, je vais juste voir encore une dernière fois. Je vais faire appel. Si vous avez une question, veuillez, s'il vous plaît, utiliser la fonction lever la main au bas de la page. I'm just going to make a last call for questions. If you have a question, to please use the raise hand function at the bottom of the page. Je ne vois plus de questions. I see no more questions. So this will conclude our press conference. Ceci conclut notre conférence de presse. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Merci, thank you.
Thank you for listening today, and thank you for supporting us with our sponsors. Please go to depictions.media for more information and click on our contact link and let us know how we can help bring your story and help bring us to a better world. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.